How sugar affects your body. Sugar is the only substance in the modern food supply that simultaneously damages your liver, hijacks your brain, ages your skin, and creates its own craving, and most people consume it dozens of times before noon. Segment 1. The biological takeover begins immediately the moment refined sugar enters your body. A rapid and far-reaching biological sequence is initiated, one that touches virtually every organ system and produces consequences that extend considerably beyond the caloric content of what was consumed. Within minutes of ingestion, refined sugar is absorbed through the small intestinal wall directly into the bloodstream. Blood glucose rises sharply, triggering an immediate pancreatic insulin response designed to clear that glucose from the bloodstream and direct it towards cells for energy use or storage. This process, in a metabolically healthy individual consuming sugar infrequently, operates efficiently and resolves within approximately 2 hours. But the modern relationship with sugar is not infrequent. The average adult in industrialized populations consumes between 17 and 22 teaspoons of added sugar daily, far exceeding the quantities the body's insulin response system was designed to manage repetitively. And with each repeated cycle of sharp glucose elevation and aggressive insulin response, the biological consequences compound in ways that no single consumption event would produce alone. The pancreas, responding to chronically elevated glucose demands, maintains elevated insulin output. Cells throughout the body, overwhelmed by the persistent insulin signal, progressively reduce their responsiveness to it, requiring greater insulin to achieve the same glucose-clearing effect. This is insulin resistance, the metabolic foundation of type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and the broad spectrum of metabolic dysfunction that chronic sugar overconsumption drives. And it develops not through any single moment of dietary excess, but through the daily accumulation of a consumption pattern normalized by the modern food environment. Segment 2. The organ-by-organ damage. The liver. Fat factory activation. Fructose, comprising half of the sucrose in table sugar and the majority of high-fructose corn syrup, is metabolized exclusively by the liver, unlike glucose, which is distributed to cells throughout the body. When fructose arrives at the liver in the quantities delivered by modern sugar consumption, it overwhelms the liver's capacity to process it through normal metabolic pathways. The excess is diverted to de novo lipogenesis, the conversion of fructose directly into fat within hepatic tissue. This fat accumulates within liver cells, impairing their function, generating local inflammation, and initiating the progressive damage sequence of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Simultaneously, the fat synthesized from excess fructose is packaged into very low-density lipoprotein particles and released into the bloodstream, elevating triglyceride levels and contributing to the dyslipidemia most directly associated with cardiovascular risk. The liver is not merely processing sugar. Under conditions of chronic excess, it is being actively damaged by the very substrate it is attempting to manage. The brain. The neurological addiction mechanism. The impact of sugar on the brain represents one of the most clinically significant and least publicly understood dimensions of its biological effects, because it operates through the same neurological pathway as addictive substances, producing tolerance, craving, and compulsive consumption through mechanisms that are neurochemical rather than psychological. Sugar consumption stimulates the release of dopamine in the nucleus accumbens, the brain's primary reward center, producing the immediate pleasure response that makes sweet foods universally appealing. Under normal evolutionary conditions, this reward response was calibrated to rare, seasonal encounters with natural sweetness. Under conditions of daily refined sugar access, the dopamine system undergoes the same progressive desensitization observed with other rewarding stimuli, requiring increasing consumption to generate the same reward response. Simultaneously, sugar activates opioid receptors in the brain, producing mild euphoric and calming effects that reinforce consumption through the same neurological pathway activated by opioid compounds. The withdrawal from habitual sugar consumption produces measurable neurochemical changes, irritability, anxiety, craving, and low mood, that drive reinstatement of consumption in patterns that parallel the behavioral characteristics of substance dependence. This is not a metaphorical comparison. It is a mechanistic one, and it explains why reducing sugar consumption through willpower alone, without addressing the neurochemical dependency driving intake, produces the high failure rates observed in most dietary sugar reduction attempts. The skin. accelerated aging through glycation. The connection between sugar consumption and skin aging operates through a specific and well-characterized biochemical process called glycation. The non-enzymatic bonding of glucose and fructose molecules to the proteins composing dermal tissue, most significantly collagen and elastin. When sugar molecules attach to collagen fibers through glycation, they form advanced glycation end products, aptly abbreviated as AGEs, that cross-link adjacent collagen fibers, reducing their structural flexibility and impairing their ability to maintain the skin's firmness, resilience, and smooth architecture. Glycated collagen is stiffer, more brittle, and more prone to degradation than healthy collagen, producing the characteristic loss of skin elasticity, deepening of lines, and dullness of complexion that accelerated aging produces. Advanced glycation end products also generate oxidative stress within dermal tissue, activating inflammatory pathways that further degrade collagen and impair the cellular processes through which the skin repairs and renews itself. The rate of glycation and AG accumulation is directly proportional to blood glucose levels, meaning that the chronic postprandial blood glucose spikes produced by regular refined sugar consumption accelerate dermal aging at a rate directly reflecting the magnitude and frequency of those spikes. Segment 3. The reduction strategy that works with biology reducing sugar consumption is not primarily a discipline challenge. It is a neurochemical and dietary structure challenge, and addressing it effectively requires strategies that work with the biology driving consumption rather than attempting to override it through willpower alone. The most impactful single structural change is the elimination of liquid sugar, sweetened beverages, commercial fruit juices, energy drinks, and sweetened coffees, which deliver refined sugar without the fiber protein, or structural components that moderate its absorption and blunt the sharp blood glucose response driving insulin dysregulation. Liquid sugar is absorbed more rapidly, produces a greater insulin spike per gram, and generates less satiety than equivalent solid sugar calories, making its elimination the highest leverage single dietary change available for blood glucose management and sugar reduction. Replacing refined sugar with whole fruit leverages the natural sweetness that satisfies the neurological reward response while delivering fiber that moderates glucose absorption, vitamins and minerals that support the metabolic processes sugar consumption depletes, and the water content and food volume that generate genuine satiety rather than the appetite-amplifying cycle of refined sugar consumption. Adequate protein and dietary fat at every meal, particularly at breakfast, stabilizes blood glucose across the hours following eating, reduces the insulin-driven glucose crashes that generate the most powerful mid-morning and mid-afternoon sugar cravings, and maintains the neurochemical environment in which the dopaminergic craving signal driving sugar consumption is least powerful. Addressing sleep deprivation is an underappreciated but mechanistically critical component of sugar reduction. Sleep-deprived individuals exhibit significantly greater activation of the brain's reward response to high-sugar foods, reduced activity in the prefrontal cortex regions governing impulse control, and elevated ghrelin levels that specifically amplify desire for calorie-dense, high-reward foods. Improving sleep quality reduces sugar cravings through neurochemical mechanisms that dietary interventions alone cannot replicate. Sugar is not simply an indulgence with caloric consequences. It is a biologically active substance that damages the liver, rewires the brain's reward circuitry, accelerates the aging of skin and arteries, disrupts the immune system, and creates the neurochemical conditions for its own continued overconsumption, all while delivering no essential nutrient that whole foods cannot provide more safely and more beneficially. The biology of sugar's effects does not require exceptional consumption to become significant. It requires only the daily normalized intake that the modern food environment delivers automatically to anyone who does not make deliberate choices to the contrary. Reduce the liquid sugar. Replace refined sweetness with whole fruit. Stabilize blood glucose through protein and dietary fat. Protect sleep. Address the neurochemical craving rather than simply resisting it. The body does not need sugar to function. It needs glucose, and it can produce everything it requires from the whole foods that deliver it alongside the fiber, micronutrients, and protective compounds that refined sugar has stripped away. Choose the whole food. Your liver, your brain, your skin, your heart, and your immune system are all waiting for the same decision.